Good Vach and Shavua Tov, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. It is a great privilege and an honor to have an opportunity to learn with you a little bit tonight on the night, the Motzoi Shabbos of that which is traditionally Shabbos HaGadol, even though the official Shabbos HaGadol is this coming Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, that is going to come, a Shabbos that will come on Erev Pesach. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and thanking our sponsors for tonight's year, Sariv and Jeff Sklar, who are commemorating the yahrzeit of Jeff's father, Avram Shmuel ben Simcha, and to Ronnie and Paul Lustiger, Jan and Rabbi Harvey Silverstein, and Sherry and Rabbi Richard Schiffmiller, in memory of their beloved father, William Spilkey, Zev ben Aryeh Leib. Once again, I find myself beginning a Shabbos HaGadol Drasha with some awkward disclaimers, disclaimers that I could not have imagined making more than a year ago. The first, which should be obvious, is that tonight's Drasha is virtual. It is being broadcast live, so you have an opportunity to hear from your homes, wherever you may be. And therefore, by definition, it is a little less formal than a traditional Shabbos HaGadol Drasha has been, and one that we hope and pray Be'ezras Hashem to be able to participate in the future. Additionally, once again, I'm going to state from the outset that this will not be a typical Drasha in the sense that the forum and the style for the Drasha was and remains for me somewhat of a difficult question and a complicated balance, but I've landed once again in trying to talk with you, speak with you about the situation in which we find ourselves in the moment, and focus a little less on the typical traditional lamdus, the pilpul and halacha that would often accompany, certainly be an important part and a feature of a drasha like this. I say this not as an apology per se. I know that there are different tastes and there's a time and a place for everything. Like many of us, I'm still sort of making all this up as I go along, but my heart and my instincts and my gut are such that once again, it is appropriate for me to deliver a virtual non-Shabbos HaGadol Drasha, Shabbos HaGadol Drasha. At the same time, even though I'm beginning with very similar disclaimers that I started with last year, this year is different. Whereas last year there were very few, maybe even no options. This year there are. Needless to say, that is something for which we should be profoundly grateful. And at the same time, it presents us with an entire new set of challenges that we weren't facing a year ago. And in some respects, that is precisely the point that I hope to focus on this evening. Now, I don't know among those who are listening right now who remembers or frankly who listened to last year's Drasha, but I want to begin with just a little bit of a recap, not to review what I said per se, not in any great detail, but just sort of set the stage and the setting where we were a year ago. We were obviously still very shell-shocked, reeling from the initial effects of a crisis of epic proportion. And I tried at the time to reflect upon some of the unique opportunities that we had been presented with at the time as individuals and as a community. And I attempted to redirect our fear and frustrations to honest reflection and introspection. We had been offered an opportunity to completely rethink and reimagine the way that we experience life. And I argued at the time that that is a gift, that was a gift and remains a gift that should not be taken for granted, an opportunity that should not be squandered. Some of the issues that we touched upon last year, and I'm not going to discuss them this evening. Shuls. Obviously, we were horrified and traumatized by the thought that we could not be in shul. But it was an opportunity to reflect honestly upon what shul means to us. What was our relationship with shul beforehand, and what would we want it to be when Be'ezras Hashem we could return? Schools. I asked that we take an honest look at our yeshivos, at the educational system, which many of us are part of and support and love and cherish, and think honestly and critically about areas of needed improvement. I spoke, like many others, about simchas, the way that we celebrate happy occasions, our social interactions, large and small, the dating process, Bikkur Cholim and Levayos, Pesach programs, relationships with each other at home, relationships with God, and more. And I was very upfront and transparent last year that I was attempting to exploit a situation in which we were all feeling very vulnerable. Rather than pretend otherwise, I pointed out that I feel that that is in fact what we are required to do in such situations. The Rambam in Hilchos Tanis tells us that when we live through an Eis Tzara, a time of difficulty, of challenge in the community, it is prohibited to ignore such a reality and to say, this is minhago shalolam, this is just life, things happen, and to react in such a way is, as the Rambam says in Midas Achzarios, it is cruel because it allows people to continue to go about life exactly the way they have always been doing so. And an Eis Tzara is an opportunity to stop and to reflect. So that was last year. And what about next year? Where will we be a year from now? What will our lives look like then? Will I be giving my Shabbos HaGadol Drasha live here on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are now? Only time will tell. Of course, we can and we should be hopeful. But if we've learned one thing over the last year, is that you never know. Only time will tell. But the question that I'd like to pose tonight is not where were we a year ago and where will we be a year from now, but where are we right now? We know where we were a year ago, and we could be hopeful and confident that we will be in a better place a year from now. But where are we now? I don't need to take your time to state the obvious. We have seen tremendous progress, and slowly but surely we have been afforded opportunities to consider more options than we had a year ago. But I want to ask a different question. And it may sound like somewhat of an unfair question to ask, but I'm posing it. It's an open question. I ask myself this question, and I ask you to ask yourselves as well. And that is that, are we better off or worse off than we were a year ago? Who are we compared to who we were a year ago? And you can argue that it's a silly question. After all, we are who we are. Naturally, we're not all going to be the same as each other, and we won't be the same as who we were perhaps yesterday, the year before. And it's difficult to really think and reflect honestly upon such a question. But I think at such a time, it is important to explore this question. And to be clear, I'm not asking from a health perspective, but as individuals and as a community, where are we relative to where we were a year ago? Have we changed? If so, for better or for worse? Have our attitudes shifted? Have our perspectives changed? Do we feel more enriched than we were a year ago? Or perhaps more confused, frustrated, bitter, maybe worse? How have our relationships changed, if at all? Are we closer to the people in our lives? Have our friendships strengthened or weakened? Has our relationship with God changed at all? Do we feel closer or more distant? Have our conversations with God changed quantitatively, qualitatively? And I think it's important to acknowledge something that I could not have imagined a year ago, but I recognize right now is a very, very real possibility. And that is that we can, in theory, emerge from this entire tekufa, this unprecedented time in history, at least in our lives, basically the same people, with memories and experiences that perhaps unique and unprecedented, memories that we will never forget, but maybe more or less the same people. I believe, and I present to you tonight, that you should consider that if we emerge from this tekufa exactly the same people that we were beforehand, more or less, then we will have wasted perhaps the greatest opportunity that we have been offered in our life. There's a pasuk that we say every Sunday morning. It's a Shir Shel Yom. We'll say it Be'ezras Hashem tomorrow morning. It's from Tehillim Perek Chav Daled. David HaMelech asks, Mi aleh b'har Hashem, u'mi yakum b'mkom kadsho? Who ascends the mountain of God and who could remain in that holy place? Niki chapayim, one who has literally clean hands. Uvar levav, a person who is a person of heart. Asher lo nasa lashav nafshi, who does not carry his soul lashav in vain, velo nishbala mirma, and he does not take vows deceitfully. Now, if you look very closely and you were listening closely, you would have noticed that I actually mistranslated one of those words. I did so because I wanted to fit, because there's an obvious and glaring grammatical error, it would seem, in that pasuk. Asher lo naso lashav nafshi, one who does not carry, it should say nafsho, his soul, but it says nafshi, my soul. How do we understand that? So the Chavetz Chaim, in a famous mashal, explained that we can understand the pasuk like this. He said, imagine there was a person who was a very needy individual who experienced some very, very difficult times in business, and he wanted to borrow a substantial amount of money. And so therefore he went to a gvir, a wealthy, generous individual, and he knocked on his door and he said, please, I really need your help. I need to rebuild myself. My business has collapsed and I need a loan. And he asked him for a loan, let's say $500,000. And this individual, who was very well off and very generous, said to him, are you going to use it? He said, yes. You need it? Yes. Okay. He says, I'm going to give it to you, but you're going to have to return it. I'm going to give you a year to return this money. And he said, I will. I give you my word. I have a plan. I'm going to put the money to good use and I will absolutely return it to you a year from now. So the individual goes and he goes to the bank and he prepares the loan and he gets all of it together and he gives him a bag full of cash, $500,000. And he says, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so grateful. I so appreciate it. And he leaves. And a year later, this man comes on the day and he knocks on the door of this kavir and he says, I'm here to return the money that you lent me a year ago. Thank you so much. And he hands him the exact same bag. The cash exactly the way it was given to him. Nothing was touched, not a dollar spent. And the gvir says to him, are you serious? You didn't spend it? You didn't use it? You didn't touch it? You came to me telling me that you were so desperate, you were in dire straits, you needed it, I gave it to you, and here you're just returning to me the exact same thing that I gave you in the first place? Why did I give you all of this money? The Chavetz Chaim says the same is true. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us a nefesh, he gives us a soul. And with this soul, we can accomplish great things. We come to this world with incredible potential. And there is going to be a day in which we are going to give our soul back to him. And when we do so, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to say, now give me back my soul. And let me see what it looks like. David HaMelech is saying, it's not our soul, it's his soul with a capital H. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us his soul, gives us a chelek alok mimal, a piece of him, so to speak, and we are supposed to use it. What does that mean, to use it? We are supposed to take life and experience it in a way which enables our soul to become enhanced and enriched, that we should grow every day of our lives. But certainly through an experience like this, can you imagine if we would emerge from this year more or less the same people we were beforehand? However you understand what has taken place, however you personally have processed it, whomever you credit and whomever you blame, regardless of whether or not you have lost anyone close to you, and I don't mean that with any sense of disrespect or disregard, but we have all suffered, some more, some less. Whether you have maintained employment or you have suffered in a terrible way financially, whether you believe we should wear masks for the next 3 years, or if you take advantage of any opportunity to remove yours, regardless, what if we emerged from this entire experience the same people that we were beforehand? Is that not what it means to return God's soul, lashav? And it's with these questions in mind that I ask you to reflect with me for the moment on one of the most important mitzvos on the night of the Pesach Seder. We know that the Pesach Seder has several unique mitzvos that are all interconnected and intertwined, layered one on top of the other. And I'd like to focus your attention briefly to the Daled Kosos. We know that we drink 4 cups of wine, and they are dispersed throughout the Seder. The first one is connected to the Kiddush. The second cup of wine we drink at the conclusion of Magid. The third after the Birkas Hamazon, after the benching, and the fourth, of course, after Hallel. And there has been much discussed about the Daled Kosos, why we have the Daled Kosos then, whether we recite 4 brachos or only 2, whether we drink with leaning, without leaning, what if you forget, whether grape juice is acceptable. So many questions about the Daled Kosos. But tonight I'm going to ask a different question, and that is, why 4? What's the significance of that number? Why Daled Kosos? Why not Gimel Kosos? After all, there are other things at the Seder with 3. Why not 5? So this is a famous question. I'm sure it's not the first time you're hearing it. And perhaps the most famous answer is cited by the Rashbam, In his commentary, Masachas Pesachim, he quotes from the Medrash. Also, there's a similar idea which is found in the Yerushalmi, that it is keneged, it corresponds to the four Lashonos of Geula, the four expressions that the Torah uses to describe the redemption from Mitzrayim. If you take a look at the beginning of Parshas Va'era, the Torah tells us that Hashem says to Moshe, okay, I need you to speak to the Jewish people and let them know to prepare, because we're going to be going. We're going to be leaving this land. Remember that word, first word, v'hotseisi. I will be taking them out. I will be extricating them. I will be enabling them to exit, to leave this land, mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim, from under the suffering, the servitude that they have faced in Mitzrayim. V'hitzalti aschem me'avodasam. I will rescue them. That's the second lashon, from their avoda. V'ga'alti aschem b'zroa netuya v'shvatim gedolim. I will redeem them with an outstretched hand, showing and executing justice against the Mitzrim. V'lakachti aschem lila'am. And I will take them literally to be a people, v'hayisi lachem le'elokim, and I will be to them their God. Now, others, the Tartamima, in his commentary on Parshas Ve'era, point out that many others say that it's not the Arba Lashonos of Geula, but rather the Arba Geulos. The Tartamima points out that if you look at the Yerushalmi, it doesn't say the four expressions of Geula, but rather the four Geulos. And the Tartamima says it makes perfect sense that we should prefer that approach, because there's nothing special about having four words that describe essentially the same idea. After all, he said, and if there would have been 5 words or 10 words, so what? So we know sometimes we have synonymous terms that describe basically the same thing. The Torah Temima says the significance of the 4 is not the Arba Lashonos of Geula, but rather the 4 Geulos. And what does that mean? So I have the Torah Temima in front of me, but I will tell you that the Ramban and his Perush on Chumash and the Sforno and many other Mefarshim say similar ideas. Perhaps the Torah Temima is sort of summarizing the main ideas that we find in the Mefarshim, but I don't want to spend too much time on the nuances between the different ones, but I'll tell you very, very briefly what the Torah Temima says, which again, like I said, is more or less reflecting the opinions of the Rishonim. He says, what does it mean when the Torah says v'hotseisi? V'hotseisi means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will minimize the impact of the pressure, the intensity of the servitude that they were facing in Mitzrayim. As we know, as the Torah tells us, Paro subjected the Jewish people to avodas perech. It was very, very difficult, backbreaking work. So v'hotseisi is, I'm going to make it easier on you. You're not free yet, but I'm going to make it easier. And then v'hitzalti. V'hitzalti is, you are going to be completely relieved of your duties towards Paro. Paro will no longer require you to work. You will be able to sleep late. You'll be able to go on vacation with your family. You're basically going to no longer be slaves, but you're still going to be in a foreign land. V'ga'alti, I will take you from Mitzrayim. I will lead you out of that place, and I will take you to the Yam Suf. And then v'lakachti aschem lila'am. And then I will take you as my people. I will bring you to Har Sinai, and at Har Sinai we will wed, so to speak, God with the Jewish people, and we will become one. And so therefore you have 4 stages of Geula: v'hotseisi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. Now I would like to take that concept, if you will, and apply it, sort of an overlay, if you will, on the Galus and the Geula of the past year. And I want to be very clear and transparent again that I am attempting to use some homiletic license here, although I'm not going to get too shticky about connecting the dots, even though I think I probably could. I am doing this because I think there's tremendous value in viewing the events of the past year through a similar prism. Again, using the same Geula construct that the Torah uses in describing Geulas Mitzrayim. Shibud, the Galus, the exile of this past year. 1 year ago, we were facing death, sickness, fear, and tremendous uncertainty. We were essentially imprisoned in our homes, banished from our places of gathering. The streets were deserted. People who had family celebrations, scheduled weddings, holiday gatherings, canceled. Travel came to a complete halt. I can't say that it was the same as the Shibud in Mitzrayim, but for most, maybe everyone listening right now in our lifetime, it's the closest thing that we can know to finding ourselves completely enslaved, trapped, imprisoned. Well, have we since been redeemed? Have we experienced Geula? It's been a long time since last year. So let's take a look. V'hotseisi Many aspects of the crisis have been managed, have been mitigated, and some of the real fears, not all of them, have been abated. Schools, Baruch Hashem, have been able to function, albeit with many challenges. Travel has resumed. Many features of the initial lockdown have, Baruch Hashem, since subsided. Vihitzalti, tremendous medical relief, treatment options, medical resources, communal efforts. And as a result, we have been able to re-enter many of our communal spaces. Slowly but surely, we've been able to re-engage and introduce familiar aspects of our individual and communal experiences. V'ga'alti, without a doubt, the vaccine has been the greatest sign of hope and light and has signified a true physical redemption, a true indication of the unfolding redemption. The questions that we had and that we discussed of what bracha, if any, to make on the vaccine, the Shechianu Datov Ametiv, whether you did, whether you will, whether you don't, because your rabbi told you not to, I'm less interested in that. But the mere question demonstrates the significance of these developments. Really, incredible developments. V'hotzeisi v'hitzalti v'ga'alti. V'lakachti we have already defined as being the spiritual redemption. That is the point in which we become united with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And where exactly is that here? What does that mean within the context of this discussion? Where is the v'lakachti of 2020, 2021? So I'd like to come back to this in a bit, but first I want to ask a different question. And that is, why is it necessary for there to be different stages? Now, if you think about it, Geula, redemption, would be far more dramatic if there would be one spectacular moment of redemption. You know, the way it happens in stages, it's so anticlimactic. Why doesn't God just go ahead and say, boom, here, you're free? So I'd like to suggest three answers, and I'm sure there are more. Each and every one of these, I think, are important for us to reflect upon precisely at such a time. Number one, when Geula happens in stages, we are offered the opportunity, I should say, to appreciate each step along the way. Every Shabbos we say, and we're going to say it at the Pesach Seder, the Perek in Tehillim, Hodu Hashem ki tov, ki li'olam chasto. And I believe there are 26 psukim. Hodu Hashem ki tov, ki li'olam chasto. Hodu le'Elohei Elohim, ki li'olam chasto. Hodu la'Adonai Adonim, ki li'olam chasto. I'm sure you've all said those words. How do you say those words? Seems incredibly repetitious, no? Sometimes even a little irritating. Am I the only one who sometimes trips all over myself when I say these words? And if that happens to you, it's because, like me, maybe you're missing the point. We actually have at our Pesach Seder a song. You're welcome to borrow it because it works. It forces us to slow down. You know the song, Atosakum, Atosakum, Tirachem Tzion, Ki Es Lechanana Ki Vamoed. If you sing this Mizmor of Tehillim, to that, it'll force you to say Ki Li'olam Chasto 26 times properly. Dayenu. It's not just a cute song. And I know there are different tunes. And of course, the most famous one of all, it does sound like a little silly. Dayenu. It's not a cute song. It's a very, very important message. And that is that when it comes to expressing our karasato to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's not all or nothing. Our attitudes towards redemption are very biased, and our expectations of redemption are, I think, inappropriate and skewed. Even partial redemption is redemption. As we say, when we say the Dayenu kama malos tovos lamakam aleinu, ilu hotzianu mitzrayim v'lo asa behem shfatim Dayenu. Ilu asa behem shfatim lo asa ve'elohim Dayenu. You know the words, you know the song, you can go back and look. Every step along the way. Had he only done this and left us stranded in the midbar, Dayenu, it would have been enough. It would have been enough for us to say, thank you, Hashem. You know, just think about what we've witnessed over the past 70 plus years. Many call this comfortably the time in history in which we live right now, Reshit Tzmichas Gulasenu, the beginning of the sprouting of the redemption. But it wasn't a single event. Wherever you want to start with Hakamas Medina in 1948, a war, Israel, the Jews on the brink of destruction, and then another war, 1956, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, the Lebanon War, the Gulf Wars, and wars and wars and wars. Each one of those points in time in which we could look back and we could say, Kili Olam Chasto, Kibbutz Golios. And let me ask you, do we not feel a greater sense of appreciation for God's bounty when considering all of the miraculous parts along the way? not merely the sum total at the end. And it's a mistake to wait for the end. It's a mistake to wait until everything's over, till life is back to normal, to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think this is precisely what the Malachim are criticized for. The Gemara in Megillah tells us that at the Yam Suf, Bikshu Malachi Asharis Lomashira, the Malachim wanted to sing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and express their praise. And Hashem said, Masa Yodai Tava Yom Atamam Shira, my creatures, my creations are drowning and you want to sing, explains the Shalah Kadosh. Now you want to sing? Now you want to praise me now that it's all over? Where have you been until now? When we were in Mitzrayim and I told you I'm going to take them out, why didn't you sing Shira then? When I showed you Dam and Tzvardei Akinim Arav, when I showed you the Makos, when it was Makos Bechoros, when I started leading them out of Mitzrayim, you had an entire week, no Shira. Now that the Mitzrayim are dead, now that it's all over, now that we've achieved herd immunity, now I hear from you? No. The time to express the words Ki Olam Chasdo is now. Dayenu, every step along the way. The second reason I believe why Geula unfolds in stages is because Galus is intended to be constructive, not merely punitive. When we are sent into exile, when we experience difficult things in life, it is not only a punishment. Mitzrayim is referred to by the Torah as the Kur HaBarzel, the iron furnace. When you take metals and you place them in a furnace, they are there so they can be bended and shaped. It is moments of great intense heat and pressure that they are most malleable, that they are most prone to change and to growth and to becoming reshaped and reformed, to becoming something which is more refined. Says the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says Mitzrayim was the Kur HaBarzel. And this is not only when it comes to national golus, I think it's true when it comes to personal exiles as well. The Pachad Yitzchak Rav Hutner, in a famous letter, reassures somebody who is depressed and feeling down and bad about himself because he's struggling too much with his Yetzer Hara and he feels like something's wrong with him. I can never get the edge of my Yetzer Hara. Says Rav Hutner, that's wonderful. Those are the moments of greatest opportunity. And he says, he quotes like the English expression, lose a battle, win the war. You can only become great if you fall and if you struggle. Geula happens in stages because Golus is supposed to be a constructive experience. We are supposed to grow from moments of difficulty. We are supposed to grow from moments of exile. We are supposed to grow from moments in life in which we are banned from the places in which we feel most comfortable. And if we just snap and suddenly it's over, so we would lose the opportunity to slowly but surely get up. And finally, and perhaps I would say most fundamentally, redemption, by definition, the way we understand it is a process. And that's the way it needs to be. Chazal tell us in the Medrash Shir Hashirim, the Reb Chia, Reb Shimon Bar Chalafta was once walking in the Bikat Arbel. Some of you may have visited that. It's a place that people go to visit on when they go on touring in Eretz Yisrael. And they were there in the early morning hours, and they saw Ayelet HaShachar. They saw that the sun was starting to appear on the horizon. So Reb Chia said to Reb Shimon Chalafta, Kach tia gulasan shel Yisrael mitzaftesas. He says the Geula, the redemption of Klal Yisrael, is a similar way, slowly but surely. B'tchila hiba kima kima. At first, it's one little increase of light at the moment. And then slowly the sparks of the sun begin to shine more. And then the entire sky is lit up with the illumination of the sun. Why is it this way? So the Medrash in Tehillim tells us that the darkest time of the night is right before the sun rises. And people are sleeping then. And people are comfortable in the dark. And says the Medrash, if the sun would just appear suddenly, when people are sleeping, everybody would be stunned by the light. You know that feeling when you're sleeping in a dark room and somebody just turns on the light? It's blinding. Slowly, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not want to stun us, so to speak, with his Geula. Geula is a process. We say it every day. Es semach David avdecha meheros atzmiach. You ever stand by and watch a blade of grass grow? Did you ever watch a flower grow? You ever watch a tree grow? You can't stand there and watch it. That's not how it grows. It grows naturally, slowly over time. But if you come back a week later, a month later, a year later, 10 years later, look how much progress there's been. That's, by definition, that's what Geula means. The Geula of this past year. So first and foremost, we have to appreciate Ki Liolam Chasto, the small things along the way. There is so much to be grateful for, as we have mentioned. Over the past couple of weeks in particular, we are seeing more and more families that are, Baruch Hashem, able to reunite. I'm seeing faces of people in shul that, Baruch Hashem, are there for the first time in a year. And we should appreciate the stages of redemption, each one of them reflecting a greater sense of Ki Liolam Chasto. In addition, while we may not fully appreciate it, the painfully slow process of redemption is an incredible opportunity to take stock and reflect upon how we can emerge from this crisis more refined than we were beforehand. This is our core habarzel. So now, with that, we can return to the last of the four stages, vilakachti. What does that translate into? So we already said vilakachti is a spiritual redemption. What do we mean when we speak about vilakachti in this tekufa where we find ourselves right now? So first of all, vilakachti, who is doing the taking? It sounds like vilakachti, Hashem is saying, I am taking them. Vilakachti eschem liloam, v'hayisi lachem leilokim. Hashem is bringing him close to us, but he is also asking us to come close to him. There's another lekicha here. As the Navi says, Kuchu imachem devarim v'shuvu al Hashem. In order to return to Hashem, we have to take things with us. It's not only that Hashem is vilakachti. We need to take things. And I'm asking you to think about it in those literal terms. What are we going to take from this time of our life? What are we taking with us? And I want to acknowledge, I'm going to put it out there, that this is a very difficult message to communicate. And it is difficult for me to communicate it, and I think it's been a difficult message throughout the year for us to digest. The Meshech Chachma tells us to take a look at the very psukim that I've been mentioning, that after the Torah tells us that Hashem says, V'hotzeisi v'hitzalti v'ga'alti v'galakachti, it's probably one of the most inspiring drashas ever given. Moshe Rabbeinu comes before the Jewish people and he says, I got great news for you guys. We're leaving here. And you know what the pasuk says? V'lo shamu al Moshe mikotze ruach u'miyavoda kasha. They didn't listen to him. Can you imagine how deflated Moshe Rabbeinu must have felt? I thank you for joining me tonight. People are listening to me. Moshe Rabbeinu, they wouldn't even listen to him. Why is that? So the Meshech Chachma explains. Many explain why exactly they wouldn't listen. You know what he says? He says it's just a basic feature of human psychology. When a person is down in the dumps, when a person is having a very, very difficult time, when a person is suffering, when a person is struggling, it's not a good time to inspire them. They don't want to hear your speeches. They don't want to hear your exciting Torah. They're just really, really burned out. I think Chazal basically say the same thing. It's a Mishnah. I don't know if I flagged it, but it's a Mishnah here it is. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, where Shimon Elazar says, Al teratzas chavercha b'shas kaso. If a person is very angry, don't try to appease them when they're very angry. Al tenachamenu b'shas shemeisa mutal lefanav. If a person has just suffered a terrible loss, don't try offering words of comfort when they're grieving at that moment. If a person is very angry, if a person is very agitated, a person very upset, you don't start giving them mussar shmuzes about how they can grow. And I know that it is very, very difficult to talk about hopeful messages and spiritual takeaways when still dealing with quarantines and PCR tests and class closings, and Rahman al-Islam, worse. And I have thought about this over the past year. My recent attempt at humor through the dinner video, which seems to have resonated with people in ways that I did not initially intend nor anticipate. And I think precisely because it touched upon some very serious issues, but it was delivered in a way that people could comfortably absorb. So it didn't sound like a mussar shmuz, but it did touch upon some very, very serious concerns. The bottom line is, though, it is very difficult to reflect upon the dvarim that we are going to take with us from this Korah Barzel when we are still very much in it. And number one, it's important for me to acknowledge that fact and to validate it. I would be lying to you if I told you that this is not something that I have struggled with myself over the past 6 months as I have. The adrenaline of last Nisan has long been depleted. The energy of last Pesach, which was admittedly catalyzed by confusion and fear, has long since waned. And we're tired, exhausted. Many of us feeling, you'll forgive me, sick and tired of all of this. And the last thing that anybody wants to think about right now is, how am I supposed to grow from all of this? But I really think that we have no choice. Rav Asher Weiss shares a very, very beautiful thought. He says, Chazal tell us that between the first and the second of the Dalet Kosos, we're permitted to drink and to eat. Before the second and third, we're permitted to drink and eat. However, before the third and the fourth cup, you're not permitted to eat or drink. No hefsek is allowed. And he says there's a hint. This is a remez for a very important idea. He says, and I'm going to read it to you, Rabim Hanashim HaChoshvim. Many people think, She'ikar HaGeula Geulas HaGuf. Many people think that the real redemption in life is physical redemption. Hucherus v'chofesh u'prikas ol zarim. Whatever, being freed, emancipated, liberated from some threat. Lididam dai b'shalosh shalom shagula v'tzeisi v'tzalti v'galti. So for these people, the first three lashonos, that's enough. And the third lashon, v'lakachti eschem li la'am, so he muchanim levater. They're willing to be mevater, and that's okay. Bo Chazal Lamdenu, says Rav Weiss, Chazal have come to teach us. Dafka ben shalosh rishonim. The first three, efshar lahafsik. You can interrupt. Ava ben shlishi l'revi'i ein lahafsik. This is where we are right now, my friends. We are now at a point, I believe, where we are between the moment of votzeisi v'hitzalti v'ga'alti on the one hand, almost behind us, and v'lakachti, right ahead. Ki ikar ha'geula geulas ha'nefeshi, says Rav Weiss, when we speak about redemption, we're talking about spiritual redemption. Agulaseinu v'yapudus nafshenu, onumodim mahalim geulas ha'nefesh, akiras alakim, beis hamigdash v'ashras hashchina, hein hagula. This is what we mean when we speak about geula. Think about the Ramban, who famously in the beginning of Sefer Shemos in his Akdama says, why do we call Sefer Shemos Sefer Geula? Only the first half talks about geula. But the Geula ends in Parshas B'Shalach when they leave in Kriyas Yam Suf. It's all over. The second half of Sefer Shemos has nothing to do with Geula. Mishkan, Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayakov, Pekudei. So the answer is, it does. We cannot speak about physical redemption in a vacuum. We cannot speak about the reopening of our society and getting back to schools and the vaccine and forgetting how the Rav teaches that for the Jew, it's not freedom from, but it's freedom to. What am I doing with all this newfound freedom? You should know that even our yearning for the ultimate geula, for the geula that we daven for every day, the Rambam at the very end of Hilchos Malachim teaches, Lo nisavu hachachamim ha'nevim b'mos HaMashiach, the great wise men, the sages, the prophets, they do not yearn for the coming of Mashiach, kidei sheyishlitu al kol ha'olam, so that we can now dominate the world. Not that we can now be in charge and with this peace and security and that we can eat and drink and be merry and festive and celebrate. No, that's not why we want Mashiach. You know why we want Mashiach? Why do we say we want Mashiach now, says the Rambam? We just want to be able to learn. We just want to be able to do what we're put in this world to do, to become closer to God. Says the Rambam, you know what Mashiach's all about? Take a look at Hilchos Tshuva. It's not about we won. It's not about we've been saved. It's not about we almost died and now look, we've been redeemed. It's all it's so that we can grow spiritually. It's absolutely amazing when I compare where we were a year ago to now. Last year, I think during the Shabbos HaGadol, Drasha, we reflected on the opportunity that COVID afforded us. Number one, to recognize the benefits of being home, the benefits of solitude, rather than being constantly surrounded by other people, the benefits of social distancing, rather than 24/7 social immersion. That was last year's takeaway. And this year, we need to reflect upon how we can properly, responsibly, effectively, meaningfully re-engage and reintegrate one with another. And the irony should not be lost on any of us. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim explains that the reason why there are so many instances in which a person can become tameh and therefore prohibited from entering the mikdash is because it is so easy to get used to being in the mikdash. The Torah does not want us to spend too much time in the mikdash because HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to become too comfortable there. So therefore, he creates so many roadblocks, so many opportunities, for lack of a better word, for somebody to become tameh. So the Rambam says, "Ad shekemat lo timtza adam tahar." So what the Rambam says, where it's almost as if it's impossible to be pure. And the Torah does that. It is so by design, because we should never become so used to being in the mikdash. And some of you heard me over the past year quote from Chaim Shmulevitz, a beautiful idea, that when they entered the mikdash, you entered from one door, you always went out the other door. You never want to say in the mikdash, "Oh yeah, you're just here. It looks familiar. Been there, done that." That shouldn't be our attitude. So that's always true. And now, I call for each and every one of us to become reacquainted and refamiliar and to re-engage with these holy places and spaces. I want to go back for a moment to talk about the Daled Kosos. I mentioned that we drink the Daled Kosos because, as the Rishalmi tells us, it's a zecher, or it's to commemorate the Daled Geulos, the Daled Sholnos of Geula. But there are other opinions that are brought down in that same Gemara Yerushalmi, and I'd like to share with you the very strange opinion of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, why do we have Arba Kosos? Can I get Arba Kosos Shel Paro? The 4 cups of Paro, what's he talking about? So Rabbi Shua ben Levi is referring us to Parshas Miketz. In Parshas Miketz, we know that, there are lots of dreams in Parshas Miketz, but the end of Parshas Miketz, so we know that Yosef is in jail, and when he's in jail, so excuse me, it's not Parshas Miketz. Forgive me, I knew I was throwing myself off. It's Parshas Vayeshev, and when Yosef is in jail, so there are the dreams of the Sarah Ophim and the Sarah Mashkim. And if you take a look, the psukim over there actually count 4 times in which the term kos paro is used in the interpretation and the explanation or the delivering of the dream of the Sarah Mashkim. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi says very strangely, that is the makar, that is the idea, the source for 4 cups of wine on the Pesach Seder, on the night of Pesach Seder. That is extremely strange. What's going on? To say that the Daled Kosos are connected, the Arba Sholosh Gula, that makes perfect sense. We're talking about redemption. It's the theme of the night. Why are we going and saying, this is what the Sarah Mashkim, Paro's personal butler, this is what he dreamt, and therefore we have 4 cups of wine. So Rabbi Simon, in the brand new Imrei Baruch on Moadim, I want to thank my son Yisrael Yosef, who came back from Eretz Yisrael and he brought it for me, straight from Eretz Yisrael. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank my son-in-law Yisrael Benevitz, who pointed me in the direction of the 4th Maimer. Both of them together have a zechus in, number 1, giving me the sefer, and number 2, showing me where to start. And I'm so happy I took a look here, because the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Simon asked this question: what's going on over here with the 4 cups of wine? It doesn't make any sense. And he explains a fascinating idea. He explains as follows. He says the Gemara teaches in Marin lo la'adam elami yerure libo. That means that when a person sleeps at night, a person has dreams, you know what he dreams? He dreams about things that are on his mind. And even the nevuos, even the prophecies, whatever that means, that we can somehow achieve when we're sleeping at night, they also reflect a little bit about where we are in our minds, the things that we yearn for. And Reb Sami quotes an idea from the Chibas HaKodesh, Reb Eliyahu Kletzkin, who explains that when Yosef heard the Sarah Mashkim's description of his own dream, he realized that the Sarah Mashkim wanted so much to return to be able to serve Paro. He spoke so affectionately and so lovingly about Kos Paro. He just wanted to be able to serve his master. He wanted to be the devoted Eved that he was before he was thrown in jail. The Sarah Ophim, on the other hand, so the one who was in charge of Paro's bread, so he focused a lot on himself. He didn't seem to care much about Paro. He didn't seem to care about Paro's welfare or what he needed. He just wanted to get back to his position because it was a very prominent position. Yosef heard this, and he realized that based on this idea that that the Sarah Mashkim was dreaming of his own redemption, because ultimately he really, really wanted to get back to serve his Adon. And based on this, Rabbi Simon goes on to say such a beautiful idea. You know what it means that we have 4 cups of wine at the Pesach Seder as a way of remembering the Daled Kosos of Paro? because it shows us ki eved neman la'adonon gabeshivto v'yosu kolu b'yarkasei bor shvi aflazos yishaf rucho lios mekurav la'adono v'avodoso l'sharso. That when a person is imprisoned and remains in a very, very tough and difficult position, and he's not able to serve his master, at that moment, if he yearns, if there's a genuine teshuka, if there's a she'ifa, this person wants to be close to his adon, to serve his master, that brings him closer to that point of geula. And so therefore, on the night of the Pesach Seder, when we are drinking the 4 cups of wine, what we are basically saying is, we want to be able to serve you. We want to be able to return to you. So what's my message? We're running out of time here. It's already been 45 minutes. You've been a very generous audience, assuming you're still here. I can't see you. I hope you are. So what's my message? I've been asking myself that very question all week. And I'm going to just say a couple of points before I close with a message. Number one, I'm speaking to myself. I was the first to point out the benefits of solitude, the opportunities afforded to us by being isolated from the tzibur. I gave an entire series this past summer on the takeaways of the COVID crisis. But Af al pi kein, I am here again to tell you that we must recalibrate and we have to adjust and we have to prepare to re-engage and to reacclimate and to reintegrate meaningfully and sincerely. I want to say that you should not do anything that you don't feel is safe for you or for your family at this time. I'm not in a position to give medical advice or counsel, and I don't presume to be the ultimate authority as to when and how to return to various public settings. Here's what I do know. Whereas a year ago, we spent many, many months reinforcing the value of fulfilling the mitzvah of V'chai Bohem and trying to enable the countless holy Jews who were struggling and genuinely traumatized by having to bear witness to shuttering our shuls, forcing them to daven at home. It is now, I believe, safe for me to shift that message and to start to direct each and every one of us to return at the right time. A shul, as you know, is our mikdash ma'at. We just started Parshas Vayikra, say Vayikra today. This is our mikdash. This is all we have. We only have a mikdash ma'at. There is no substitute. Ever since the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and until the building of the Bayis Shlishi, there is no substitute. This is the center, the hub, the lifeline of every single Jew. It is the focal point through which and in which we become part of a tzibur in a meaningful way. The concept of a zecher lemikdash, of doing things that remind us of what the mikdash was like. So we speak about the Mar as a zecher lemikdash and Sfiyas HaOmer as a zecher lemikdash and a zecher lemikdash here and there. If you really, really want to see zecher lemikdashes everywhere, take a look in a mikdash ma'at. Everything from the height of a shul to the heichal, the Aron Kodesh, to the proches, to the duchin, to the sinks outside, to the Ezras Yisrael, to the Ezras Nashim, to the Ner Tamid, to the Tachshitei Sefer Torah, to the concept of Shliach Tzibur, to the laws of how we treat a shul, the Kampandaria. There's so much about a shul that reflects the concept of mikdash. This is our mikdash. The Rambam, in the beginning of the 8th chapter of Hilchos Tefillah, I'm not going to read it inside because I'm running out of time, but you'll take a look. It's Perek Ches Halacha Aleph. Take a look how the Rambam talks about the importance of shul and how important it is for a person when we are able to come to shul and to daven b'tzibur, and the difference between in and out. In addition to the objective benefits, the halachic benefits, if you will, I believe there are psychological benefits to coming back. You know, there have been many studies on the effects of working remotely, the pros and the cons. You can read a lot that has been written over the past year. Like it or not, for many people, that is the new norm. But as we know, being around other people, being part of a tzibur is something which is very important for our well-being. Some of you may have concerns, some may be worried, some may not know what the shul frankly feels like, it looks like inside, and I am happy to join anyone, to escort anyone on your initial re-entry into shul. It doesn't have to be during shul, just let me know. I want people to feel comfortable, and I want people to know that when they are ready, and I want to stress that when you are ready, you will hopefully feel safe. But if you would like a private tour, it would be my honor. So bottom line, what am I asking of you? I am asking you, when you are ready, to return, to come back. Return to the places and to the spaces of Kedusha, to join us so we can slowly but surely pick up where we left off. As simple as that. There is returning in the most literal sense, for of course which there is no substitute. But there is also returning in a more general and a more figurative sense, in a broader sense. When we can, we have to infuse once again a spirit in davening in a way that perhaps we weren't able to achieve before. The Gemara in Brachos says, Tanya Abishol, excuse me, Abba Binyamin Omer, Ein Tefillah Shaladim Nishmas, Ela Bebeis HaKnesses. That ideally our tefillos are heard in a shul. Shenemar, as it says, Lishmoa Ela Rina V'Ela Tefillah. B'makom Rina Sham Tehei Tefillah. In a place of Rina, that's where tefillah should be. And Rashi says over there, Bebeis HaKnesses, Shesham Omrim Hatzibor Shiros V'Sishpachos B'Ni'imas Kol Orev. I know that some shuls have been singing, some shuls have not been singing. We, Be'ezras Hashem, this week will be transitioning slowly back into a place where we can sing in shul. If you would have told me a year or two ago that I would have to ask my tzibur, please, don't sing so loud, I would have thought you're crazy. So we're going to start singing slowly and softly. But hopefully, Be'ezras Hashem, through this period of reawakening, through this period of emergence, we will be able to experience a more meaningful and genuine tefillah experience than we have been able to in the past. Secondly, get involved. Have more of a voice. The outdoor minyanim were hosted, maintained, occupied by a very, very committed group of volunteers who continue to be Moshe Nefesh. Just a couple of days ago, it was very cold outside. It was 20 degrees in the morning. Don't stop now. When you're ready to come back inside, continue to stay involved. Be involved. Step up. Even if not especially when you re-enter the shul. It's amazing to see the level of engagement, the commitment, the Mesiras Nefesh. That's really what it has been on the part of so many people. Let that continue. And if you can't yet return to shul, which I completely respect and understand, if you're not yet at a point where you can, then yearn for it. Then daven for it. Remember the secret of the Dalet Kosos, of Paro. Yearn for it. Want it. A couple of days ago, I had the opportunity, my son, he just came back from Eretz Yisrael. If you want to test him, you can. I hope he won't mind me saying this, but he knows, Baruch Hashem, the fourth and fifth brakim of Maseches Brachos, he knows them, as close to by heart as you can know anything. He really, really knows them cold. So we were learning the Gemara in Maseches Brachos, which teaches that when a person davens, they should face Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, the Mikdash. You're in the Mikdash, should face the Kodesh Kodashim. And I was very emotional. I didn't realize at the time why, but when I was reading this Gemara, I became emotional. I've seen the Gemara before, but the Gemara tells us, based on the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, that refers to that the Makam HaMikdash is Tal Piot, Tel She'kol Pios Ponim L'Sham, the place where all mouths, literally from all over the world, face. And the Chazal portray this powerful imagery of having people all over the world facing the same place. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should face my shul, your shul, whoever you may be right now. When you daven, you should continue to face Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, and the Makam HaMikdash. But on a certain level, the idea of if you can't be there, yearn for it, daven for it. To quote myself from my late son, stick a video from a couple weeks ago, Mechlal de boy Drasha. We require Drasha. You have to yearn for it. It's not just going to happen. It's not enough to say, yeah, when I'm ready, I'll go back. We have to be Doresh, our Mikdash. I'd like to conclude by sharing one thought from the end of that Maimon Dalet from Rabbi Simon. Rabbi Simon says as follows. He quotes this very, very beautiful idea, and that is that the Mishnah in Maseches Pesachim Daf Kuf Zayin Mebeis reviews what exactly is the bracha that we say at the conclusion of Magid. And we're familiar with this. Maybe not the Mishnah, but we're familiar with the bracha because we say it every year. Rabbi Tarfon says the bracha is Asher Go'alanu V'Go'alas Avaseinu Mitzrayim V'Lo Hayachosei. Rabbi Tarfon would say the bracha is, thank you Hashem for redeeming us and for redeeming our forefathers from Egypt. That is Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Kiva says that's not enough. He says, Kain Hashem Elokeinu V'Elokei Avoseinu Yigiyenu L'Moadim V'Ligorlim Acherim Ha'boyim L'Kraseinu L'Shalom Smechim B'Vinyan Yirecha V'Sasim B'Avodesecha V'Noch Achsham Min HaPsachim and Min HaZvachim Baruch Ateh Hashem Goel Yisrael. So Rabbi Tarfon says we basically thank Hashem for the past, and Rabbi Kiva says that's not enough. We have to thank Him for the future. We have to thank Him, pray, anticipate the future. And Rabbi Simon goes on to quote such a beautiful idea. He quotes from Rabbi Yitzchak Arigeli, when the Sefer Einayim L'Mishpat says that Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon over here were sort of having the same machlokas, so to speak, that they did at the end of Maseches Makos. Everybody knows the famous story at the end of Makos. Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon, together with other Tanoim, had come to the Makom Mikdash that was recently destroyed, and they were all so tzibrachen and crying and so upset to see a shul, a fox, run out of the place where the Kodesh Kodashim once was, and it was so devastating for them. And they all were crying, and they were depressed, and Rabbi Kiva was joyful, and he was happy. So what does that have to do with this? So Rabbi Yitzchak Arieli suggests that because Rabbi Kiva recognized the importance of not only thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the Geula in the past, but yearning and dreaming and already beginning to thank him for the Geula Hasida, for the Geula that will be in the future. So he was able to already taste it prematurely. So when he was standing there in a place of ruin and destruction, he was able to laugh, he was able to smile, he was able to feel the redemption even before it happened, because he had writes Rabbi Simon, he had this great yearning for redemption. That he said it's not enough to just say thank you for what you did for us, but anticipated what will be in the future. He was able to see it at that moment. So we should celebrate how far we have come, and we should dream about what could be. And again, I'm leaving it up to you. Unlike last year, where I gave so many different, in my opinion, I really tried to cover the gamut last year, and it was a long time ago. But I think at this point in time, it's not appropriate, and it may not be helpful for me to tell you what you need to take away from this year. But I want you to remember, the message from tonight is, V'lakachti eschem li la'am, v'yisi lachem le'elokim. That we should not walk away the same. We have to demand of ourselves a new and enriched version of ourselves. Kichu imachem divarim v'shuvu al Hashem. We have to be like a Rebbe Kiva. As a modern day redemption continues to unfold, hopefully nearing an end shortly, let us make sure that we appreciate and experience every stage of this unfolding Geula. V'hotzeisi v'hitzalti and v'ga'alti. We should say with tremendous kavanah at the Pesach Seder, Ki li olam chazdo. We should acknowledge all the steps of redemption all along the way, the dayenus. But most importantly, we should reflect upon v'lakachti. We should remember, as a wise teacher, you could be mafsik between the first and the second cup, the second and third, but not between the third and the fourth, because we make the mistake too often in life to think that the Ikar Geula is the physical one. The Ikar Geula is the vaccine. The vaccine is important, but the Ikar Geula is the v'lakachti. He wants us to take from this year. May we all be zoche to find the right way to do that, to reconnect with our mikdash in the most literal sense, in the broadest sense that we could possibly imagine. Hopefully, Be'ezras Hashem, slowly but surely, we will be able to reintegrate, reconnect, and join, and be able to do the things that we love doing in the ways that we do so well. But hopefully, like I said, through a new prism, a new perspective, one that enables us to do what we were doing before, but better, with a heightened sense of sensitivity and appreciation, with a more enriched and enhanced and a better version of ourselves. May we all be zoche, speedily in our days, to witness and to participate in the Gula Shlema V'Amitis B'mheira B'Yameinu. Thank you to each and every one of you. Have a Shavua Tov, a good vach, and a Chag Kosher V'Sameach.